Yo, what's good YouTube? And Tayami here, back with another video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about side decking patterns for the White Forest Azamina Fiendsmith deck. Now, surprisingly, I thought a lot more people will submit more decks, and only one person submitted a list of decks for me to go over, and that's going to be my boy Jonathan over here. So shout out to you, Jonathan, for being the only person that submitted decks. I'm not sure if people like skipped over the intro or things of that nature. It's just YouTube, so people don't always watch the videos from start to finish. But there's always like little pieces of like really important information in a lot of like videos I make. So make sure you guys just watch it all. If not, it's up to you guys. But I did drop the question to leave a comment down below to, help me with this next video that I'm preparing, which is now. So without further ado, I'm not going to waste too much of you guys' time. Let's go ahead and hop into the side decking pattern deck. I'm going to be doing this technically live on Dueling Book. So I will go over the discussions of how I would approach a certain deck, and we'll go from there. So again, if you guys are enjoying the content, make sure you guys leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. We are also trying to reach 4,000 watch hours, and we're getting very, very, very close. Also, thank you guys for helping me reach 3,000 watch hours with 500 subscribers or more, because now you guys can actually join my YouTube channel now, which I guess you guys can like super chat, which means is like donations on Twitch terms. You can just donate to the channel. Also, you can also just join the channel for like $4.99 or something like that, and you guys get special perks. And I'm actually releasing videos a lot earlier than what they supposed to be if you guys are joined to the channel. So I will be releasing videos probably like 12 hours earlier than they're supposed to. I'm not saying donate just because of that, but that's just extra perks if you guys want to support the channel. All right, with all that further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this video. All right, so here we are. So I'm gonna go into solo mode here, and then we're gonna host a duel, and we're gonna see 5 cards here. We're gonna hit begin sighting. So this is a great way, even if you don't know how to perfectly side for every single matchup, or if you want to learn how to side deck better and you don't really have the tools to like side deck and stuff, it's very cool that you can actually go here and you can like swap, whatever you want. Take a picture of this. You can screenshot here, take a picture of your deck list, and then whatever deck you're trying to go first or second versus, you can actually screenshot it. Like say, for example, we swap these out and we put in these 6, you could screenshot this and be like, this is what my side deck patterns of going first versus this deck. So whenever you go into a tournament, you know what to side in and what to side out. So very useful tip. So anyway, the first deck on the list I want to go over is Ryzeal. Right now we're going to talk about all the variations of Ryzeal. So we're going to talk about pure Ryzeal, just like the standard, plug in, fill spell. Sometimes they play the trap card in the main or in the side deck. No other engines, just that. Maybe cross out Pot of Prosperity, not Pot of Prosperity, or Pot of Desires, stuff like that, right? So if you do lose and you go first, and I mean, obviously guys, the only matchups that is going to really matter are decks that loses to Lancius. All these cards right here are all for going second. And again, this side deck is not finalized for my final build, but this is what I have currently from like, I guess, the last couple deck lists and stuff like that. So I'm going to continue to use this deck list until Orlando. Also, I don't want to leak off too much stuff because I want to not like reveal my last final deck list for Orlando. I'll talk about that once I'm done with the deck list. So this is not going to be the full final build by any means. So, but I don't want to leak off too much of my ideas because I don't want to, Anyway, so going against Fiendsmith, or sorry, just the Ryzeals, pure Ryzeals. The cards that you want to put in is of course these. This right here very much hurts the Ryzeal deck because they summon like kind of like sprites from the hand. So this will force them to go into like an early detonator, because if they start with like X, right, you want to activate this card in the standby phase, and you'll get like maximum of a +1, and then they'll probably go into a detonator. If they go into anything else, I feel like that's a little crazy, but they might, who knows. But yeah, this is always very strong versus pure. You can also side in these guys, because it also makes them like, hey, you're going to either go into detonator, or you can go into dual drive and give me like 2 draws, because they want to still end on detonator. Who knows, they might try to end on dweller. I don't know if they want to go over dweller over detonator, but dweller by itself doesn't do a lot. But detonator plus dweller, they might extend to that as well. If they suspect that your deck might be weak to dweller, especially they know what deck you're on, they might actually extend into a dweller. So that's something to keep in mind. So they might give you 2 draws off the Ferraros if they don't start with ice. If they start with ice, Ferraros is like insane. So it'll be like these guys, and then I'll side in these 2 cards for going second as well versus the Ryzeal deck. So we got our 8 cards here. So now we got to figure out what cards we're going to take out of our main deck. Now, if it's going to be pure Ryzeal, I still like the Drawers Worm, and I like the Magma Moot, because like Magma Moot, putting Drawers Worm on board is very, very essential to out the detonator. If they go for the dweller, like it's a little bit tougher. You have to kind of make the read on that, but I still think it's still worth keeping the Bestials in there, even though it's not as impactful. And on top of that, you're playing Fiendsmith, so putting bodies on board is very, very, very important, and things of that nature. So I think you will keep it in all the hand traps. There's times where if you put in a lot of Charmies, especially if you put in all 9 of the Charmies, sometimes I put Nib to 2, just because they kind of contradict themselves, because the whole point of the Charmies is that like you're forcing your opponent to end on a mid board, and Nib doesn't really impact that unless they extend into Nib. But you want to get as many draws as you can off these, and drawing into Nib is crazy. So like you still want to probably keep like maybe like 2 to 3 Nibs in here, but you don't have to always put in 3. So that's just another side like pattern option if you want to fill in more space. So continuing this, so we need to take out 8 cards. So the cards I usually take out, it is going to look really, really scary, but trust me guys, this is fine. I've been doing this for the past like month, and it has not impacted me at all. So you take out the 2 Sylvies, and you take out the 2 Black Witches, and then I usually take out 1 Engraver as part of the cards in your main engine. So these are like the 5 cards I usually take out for this particular engine. If you really want to, you could take out 2 Fiendsmiths, and you can still do the 1-1-1-1 package here if you really want to. And if you really want to get ballsy, you can cut out the entire Fiendsmith package right here and just play these 2. But I always play with these 4 cards in here. I never went into that. And then you hit these cards, and then boom, there you go. So in this position, since like pure Ryzeal is not like that crazy into Nib, like yeah, you could probably chain one of these cards and Nib will like crush them. But I think these lower impact cards, it's still very, very, very important. So maybe you could take out a Nib here if you want to keep an Engraver in here, and I will run it with that. So something similar to that. So I do like this a lot. So you can definitely see that we still have consistency. It may not look like it because we definitely cut off like a lot of our normal summons, but the whole point of playing, especially since we have the Engraver package or the Fiendsmith package here, any 2 bodies on board will equal Fiendsmith package, and you can still get a lot of consistency off of this. You can still have Black Witch into searching Azamina Azet, and still like there's a lot of things you can do with this. So that's going to be just pure Ryzeal. Let's go ahead and hop into regular Fiendsmith Ryzeal, which I think is going to be a little bit more popular than pure. You'll still fight pure, but this is going to be now with the Fiendsmith engine. And it's probably going to look exactly the same, but with the Fiendsmith cards, sometimes I even think about playing these cards in it, because something similar to like this. So I probably wouldn't even include these cards, only because you can if you still want to, but this is just my rotation. So basically I will do this still with these, take this out and put these two, take these two out. And what am I missing here? Bestials are crazy, so you would definitely want to keep the bestials in. Maybe is it something like this? Maybe because like this card is not as insane into the Ryzeal matchup. This card is mostly for Maliss. So you could do something like 2 of these and then these right here, because the Maliss is very, very, very good into Engraver. If they go start with Engraver effect and then they search track, they search the track and then they activate track. Track is going to search the Lurry, and then Lurry is going to activate in the graveyard as a chain link 1 as a mandatory effect, and then you can chain this as a mandatory, you know, as a chain 2, and you're going to get a minimum of 2 draws off of that, basically a +1. And if they revive anything else out of the graveyard, then obviously you'll get more of a, you know, of a bonus off of that. But since that's like the only interaction where this card will come up, pretty much so, and they will always have a chain in the graveyard, so you can always chain this whenever you feel like it. It's just extra pressure. And then if you draw into more of these cards, then you'll get more off of, like, if they go into the Requiem. So you wait until they make a Requiem, they activate Requiem effect, and then you chain the Ferraros, and of course you still chain these into the standby phase. So this is kind of covering their regular Ryzeal push, and then if they start with Engraver, if you chain the Perulia, if you have a second copy of one of these cards in there, then you can get more bang for your buck and stuff like that, on top of like all the other hand traps that you're playing and stuff like that. So that's how I would side deck that. Again, if you want to get really creative, if you want to put in like these 2 cards and stuff like that, you could probably cut like maybe like, I don't know, if you want to play less into talents, you can play cut a Veiler. Ash is still really good versus the Ryzeal deck. It's not like super impactful. Yes, sometimes you would want to cut an Ash just because, like, something like against like Maliss or something like that, going second against Maliss, I usually take out a Ash because it's not that crazy. Depending on how they start, Ash can hurt them more than not. A lot of the times it doesn't, so sometimes I'll cut out an Ash. But here I would do something like that if you want to get a little spicy with these. So there's options for that, and those are the cards I would take out for that. So but yeah, that is the Fiendsmith Ryzeal. And then I'm gonna talk about the Mitsurugi Mitsurugi deck. I still can't say that name right. I don't know if I'm saying that name right or not. Hopefully I hear somebody say that in real life so I can understand how to say it. But we're gonna combine this with the Ryzeal pile as well, because I feel like that's the best way to play Mitsurugi. And yeah, I think I just said it right there. That's crazy. So Ryzeal Mitsurugi, it's a little bit different. I still think this card is really insane into that. Again, you're still playing against it with the Ryzeal decks, and I feel like these cards are still very, very impactful. I tend not to play these cards because if they resolve the ritual, they get into the ritual plays and you don't completely keep them off of that, which is super scary. And still they're gonna probably end on a Dweller on top of that. I try to stay away from this and try to put as much hand trap pressure as possible. I want them to keep them off of a board as much as possible, because if they get to like the end board with the ritual, Dweller, and then detonator, you pretty much lose no matter what hand you have. So you want to keep them off that as much as possible. And then again, I'm going to do the exact same thing here. We're going to decide out these, and Ash is very important in this matchup because ashing Sanji or ashing the prayers is very important here. So Ash gets a little bit more value than like the other matches and stuff like that. So definitely keeping that in there. I would say maybe you can cut an Imp or a Veiler, because Veiler is very weird versus this deck, because if you like Veiler, the dual drive, that's like great and stuff, but then they can still normal summon Sanji and pop off from there, and it gets really tricky. Like, this deck plays through a lot of hand traps, so like the lower impact hand traps lose a little bit of value, and you want to like mix them in with kind of like the Nibs and the Charmies and stuff like that. So that's something to look into. Let's see, we're missing one more card here, so let's just take out another Veiler, because I think imperms are just as good and stuff like that. So yeah, I was swapping in like that, and that's how I would personally side deck for that matchup. So that's all 3 variations of the Ryzeal deck. let's go ahead and move over to, let's do Maliss. Let's just do Maliss. Okay, so going in with the Maliss deck, we are going to pretty much Cypher going second. Going first, there's just nothing really to talk about since I'm only playing like these 3 cards right here. And then of course you find some combinations of side decking Lancias. I'm gonna go mostly talk about just going second for the most part, because you always add these 2 cards in here, or these 3 cards in, and you'll probably take out like a Nib. You could probably take out an Imperm, and you could probably take out an Ash if you like. And you can just put in those 3, and your deck is consistent. If they hand trap you, whatever, then you have ways to stop it. So we're not talking about going first. I think going second is more important. So versus Maliss, of course, let's just say pure Maliss, right? Which I think is not that great because they do lose to a lot of different things. So of course you always auto include the Lancias. I think this card is also insane. And then you go into the Perulias, and then these 9 cards are the cards I would personally use into the Maliss matchup. And then we go back into our normal, like cutting these 4. We cut the traps. We cut the Bestials because they don't really do much in this matchup. You can cut an Engraver, and then boom, you have a beautiful little list here. Now, I said before that Ash is not that crazy. So what you can do, you can actually put Ash to like 1 or 2. And then if you're very scared of like, I don't want to call these Sylvies, you can put in 2 Sylvies here and keep 2 Sylvies and cut an Ash instead. So there's like a little bit of flexibility. If you don't feel comfortable of cutting all these, you can cut those and just have a little bit more consistency going second if you wish. So that's just giving you some options on that. Okay, so now moving over to, let's say, I don't think Sky Striker Maliss is a thing anymore. You'll probably still run into it because people are just behind. But if you were to go against the Sky Striker variation, I feel like the cards you'll put in are still these, and then still this. And this right here gets a little bit more value because they start with the Engage engine. Then this just gets a little bit more bang for its bucks, and they're mostly on board breakers when they're doing that. So if they own like a mid board, whatever, then you don't have to worry about hand traps, which is why I think the Sky Striker variation is not as good. And it's not good into Ryzeal because they have to deal with the Twin Eclipse, and that just kind of shuts down the board breaker portion, which is why I think board breakers are really risky. And then of course Dweller versus most other decks. So yeah, that's how I would side deck versus that deck, kind of cutting the same cards. And then you have the Maliss Fiendsmith, which I think it's probably the best version currently right now, especially since now you can go into the Abao or Aboa, the Lightless Shadow. You can go into that deck or that card more. So again, you can actually keep in the Bestials in that matchup, which is very fine. Wouldn't hate you for that. If you don't feel like you should be hitting the Fiendsmith with the Bestials, you can definitely cut them. But I do like the Bestials versus the Fiendsmith stuff, which I think is still really good. Perulias are still not very strong versus Maliss. The most you'll get off bat is probably a net 0. So you get a 1-for-1 trade, and they can still technically play around this and give you a -1. So it'll still just be these 9 cards. It'll just still be the same 9. So yeah, I think that's how I will put it in here. And let's see, I will cut these, and then of course cut those. I will keep the Bestials in here. Nibs are still pretty good. You can probably get away with maybe cutting like Valor Imperm a little bit. Probably cutting more Valors than Imperms, because this is still going good as your 6th card where Valor is not. So maybe you can cut Valors to 1 here. And then put in these 9 cards, and I think you're off to the races. Again, if you're not feeling too comfortable about cutting a whole bunch of these Sylvies or Black Witches, you can always just cut an Ash and it will be fine. Or I'm sorry, I forgot, we can cut the Fiendsmith as well. So if you want to, don't feel so safe about that, you can just do something like that. Because again, your ratios for going second in most matchups changes because you get an extra card. So that changes your consistency from your engine a little bit higher. So yeah. All right, moving on to a completely new deck. I'm going to be real with you. Swordsoul Tenyi, I'll mess with that next. I'm not too familiarized how they play. I've never went against the new support of the Fiendsmith, or sorry, the Swordsoul Tenyi deck. So I'm gonna just assume that the new stuff, I think they can play around Nib a little bit better. They get a new field spell. The level 4 is insane. But if I'm still thinking about how the average Sword Soul deck plays, I think the Bestials are so strong to hit the Tenyis out of the grave. I think Veilers and Imperms are still very strong to stop like the Moye or whatever. I don't know if they can play around Veiler a lot more because they probably got more pushes. But I would still have to keep that in there. The Nibs are probably still really, really good in combination with other hand traps. So definitely keep that and stuff in there. So here, I still think they summon from the extra deck quite a bit for what I would assume, because they have to go into the Link one sometimes. They can still go into Shishao and other things of that nature. So I think Ferroros is still very strong. And also they have that one Tenyi that summons from the extra deck or some from the main deck. So very strong versus that. And just in Sword Souls, they do summon from the hand a lot. I know Moye summons from the hand. Lord Long summons from the hand, the one that like burns you from 12 for synchroing and stuff like that. So from there, I know for the fact that, and Tengi's also summon from the hand as well. So Berulia probably eats up very well. I don't know if you would side deck Lancia versus this, because I don't know how often they will go into like their Tengi plays, but if you want to, definitely test that out. I don't know how impactful that is. And I don't know if they summon from the graveyard enough for Meowth to be reliable. You could probably put in these two for like, maybe you could board break, because I don't think they put up like an FTK insane in board, so board breakers might be very good versus them. So yeah, we'll go back to the same cuts here. We can cut those, maybe this, and then I guess you can cut like this is 8 cards here. We got 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. We can cut a random card here. Let's just cut a Veiler. I don't know. Or if you're not really feeling the Bestials, you can actually cut a Magmamoot, keep the Jerusalem in there, so you don't see too many Bestials, if that makes sense. And then just go from there. So maybe something like that. Again, I had 0 experience versus the deck in post SUDA, so hopefully that helps. All right, next here we got the fish pile. The fish pile. So this is going to be very easy for the most part. So going against the fish deck, obviously Bestials are very, very bad going second. So Perulia eats, this eats. I forget if they summon from the graveyard too often. I'm gonna go ahead and say no, don't put these in here. You can put these 2 cards in here, which is very, very fair. And so now we have another 8 side card side deck. So we cut the Bestials, we cut these. Again, we can cut these and then do something like that. Again, if you don't feel comfortable of cutting too many of these, you can just get rid of this and just hand trap them to death. Like if you open like Veiler plus Nib, I just don't understand how they beat that, because the first play normally is going into a Bahamut Shark, you Veiler it, and then they summon 2 more monsters, you Nib it, and then boom, you're good. And then of course these cards right here just add more pressure. I just don't see how they beat you more than not. So I feel like you have a very decent chance into that matchup. So that's how I would side deck for that. So very simple on that. Let's see. Let's do Kash tier Fiendsmith. I actually just got off my last match up today before I started making this video was versus that deck, and that deck doesn't feel real. It just doesn't feel real at all. I don't know if that's still fair or not, but it was just so easy to beat them. Even with the unicorn ripping out like maybe your Fiendsmith engine, or maybe they trying to, I don't know. It's just too many engines in your deck that they can't interact with. Like you got the Azamina stuff, you got the White Forest stuff. Like what do you hit? Like you hit the Synchro 6s. Do you hit the I don't know, the Requiem, which I think is correct in most cases. And then you still got like a Guardian Chimera. You still got like so many different lines. Like it's hard to interact with that. Fenrir does nothing to the deck because the deck can like easily float into more bodies and stuff like that. Birth is like pretty scary because you can put a lot of cards in your graveyard and your deck is, I wouldn't say mostly spells, but trust me, you get to your spells more than you think. So that's just kind of weird as well. And banishing resources out of your graveyard is probably the scariest part. So I think Birth is probably the scariest card of the Kash tier portion. And then you're going against Fiendsmith. Now, let me talk about Fiendsmith right now for all the Fiendsmith haters, because I've been getting a lot of hate, at least when practicing versus random people online. They're not playing the Fiendsmith package. The Fiendsmith package is very popular. It's very good at grinding. I don't think it's a broken engine. It's a very good engine. It fixes a lot of issues of a lot of people's decks. Like, for example, Ryzeal. The problem with pure Ryzeal that it loses the D barrier. But with the new Fiendsmith stuff, it fixes that because now they have another set of extra monsters they can go into that can play through a D barrier and stuff like that. Same thing with the White Forest engine. It helps you play through Droll more because now you can pivot into making the Fiendsmith combo line and stuff like that. And it also helps you with other things too because of Requiem, and it's just like it enhances it. Now, if you want to complain about one card combos, like pitching Engraver to end on a Caesar or a Desiree is not broken. Okay, so guys, if you're complaining about the Fiendsmith engine, you're trash at the game. I'm just going to be real with you. You're bad. Okay, now I get it. It's very popular. It's annoying. You see it all the time. You're like, oh my god, I hand trapped them twice and they just linked it off into Moon and popped off. That's the punish, right? Like, that's the punish. That's why you have to make sure you play your hand traps accordingly, because you can suck up 2 hand traps, still end on Desiree, plus like some follow-up depending on how you start with the combos and stuff like that, and they can still push through it if your deck is like strong enough. That's why White Forest is scary, because they can still push through 2 hand traps, still end on the Fiendsmith package, and then still end on more depending on their hand, right? So yeah, I just want to get that off my chest. Like, the Fiendsmith package is very popular. That's why I think it's annoying. It's in everybody's deck. I think it's a little too splashable, which makes it very strong, and it has like a resource loop, which also makes it very strong. But I don't think it's like broken, if that makes sense. I think it's good. I think it's borderline good, or I guess borderline broken in that sense. But yeah, they just don't have any restrictions, so it's just tough. But anyway, so enough of that rant. So Kash tier Fiendsmith. Yeah. The scary thing about the Bestials versus that matchup is they start with Unicorn and then they get into the Engraver package. It can be very scary because then they can rip 2 cards out of your extra deck. That right there can hurt you. So these could be very risky. I will still play it just because when I went against them, I opened with Magma Moot, and then they summoned, they went Unicorn, Search Birth, and they normal summoned on the Unicorn, went into the Fiendsmith package, and then I Magma Mooted their Engraver, and then they went Birth, bring back Unicorn. That was basically all they end on. Like, that deck is not good. And then I searched for Druid's Worm, and then I activate Druid's Worm in face to get rid of the Lacrima out of the graveyard. Because I know in that deck they play two Requiem, so I was like, let's get rid of the Lacrima. Hopefully they don't play. I'm sure they play more Lacrimas, but I went with that. They ripped the Guardian Chimera, which out of all cards, why would you rip this? Because I know they went first game 1. I hit them with a Guardian Chimera because they went Fenrir target Sylvie, and I was like, chain, make Guardian Chimera, wipe the entire board, OTK'd them. So they guess got hit with PTSD, but like that's not real. That's not correct. So then I had to just grind with the Fiendsmith engine, or sorry, the Kash tier engine. So all I did was went into battle phase, literally Druid's Worm crash, and then I normal summoned Sylvie, and the game was over. So yeah. So side deck. They play Kash tier cards, so you can get away with just playing this. The problem with Perulia and the Kash tier version is that, like, unless they normal summon Lacrima, or they have Lacrima plus like Kash tier cards, that's the only way you can get a +1. But like, they don't care for that because that's the only, like, that's them giving you the max amount of like draws, so that doesn't give them that much pressure. You can still technically do it if you like to. I think in my matches I still did it just because, you know, what they did with like Birth can normal summon more cards, or, you know, things of that nature. I think I saw Baby Arias art in there too, so I think that's why I also included this, because I'm not sure why they're playing Baby Arias art. So yeah, but I think I included that just because of that. You still do this because it stops the Fiendsmith engine. You can still technically do this if you like. I wouldn't recommend it too much. Maybe you can do this as like a 2-of, because Birth can give you a draw. And then the Fiendsmith engine, they start with Engraver. You can get 2 off that too. So technically you can get 3. depending on how they play it. And then you put this in here because this wrecks the Kash tier engine. Like, board breakers go crazy versus the Kash tier engine. So yeah. Oh, also, I don't like putting crossouts in, or it's not crossouts, the call bot engraves going second, because crossing out or call bot engraving their Fiendsmith engine hurts your Fiendsmith engine. So this why I haven't put in call bot engrave, is that's the reason. So yeah. But yeah, that's what I would do here. So maybe something like that if you like. 1, 2, there's a lot of cards here, so it's 8, 11. Maybe this is not very necessary to do all this, because you can, I mean, just hand traps just hurts this deck. Maybe we can keep a Drawer's Worm in there, I guess. Maybe cut the Magma, but I do like Magma. And then you can get rid of this, maybe some of this. Maybe we can cut Ash down to 2, because I don't like ashing cards when they have Unicorn out, but again, to your discretion. Maybe we could cut a Magma Moot. Maybe we can only play one of those or something like that. Yeah, I mean, something like this can be very solid. I mean, you can probably cut a Nib or something like that, and maybe keep a Magma Moot. So like, there's different options on how you want to feel out on that matchup in particular. But hopefully that answers your question on thoughts. It keeps you thinking. All right, so we went over the fish piles, we went over Ryzeal variations, we went over Maliss variations, Kash tier of Fiendsmith, Swordsoul. We haven't went over Crytron. Let's go over Crytron. Tenpai Fiendsmith. I'll do a Tenpai Fiendsmith thing, and then we'll wrap it up with heroes. Let's just throw in heroes, right? Because maybe people don't know how that deck works, so maybe I can talk about it. So anyway, let's hop into that. So let's do Crytrons next, right? So obviously, these cards come out like they just come out like they're all waters. They don't really get impacted by the bestials, so they can automatically get cut out. So here, Call by the Grave is trash, remotely trash going second, because you can't call by the grave any of their cards if they have clusters, because none of their monsters can be banished. You can probably put in these cards if you like. You also put in these summoning out the graveyard. They can kind of get impacted by this. They got so many crazy lines that I feel like this card may be pretty mid versus them, but I feel like it's not too bad versus them. This could be like a 2 of. This card is pretty good, and it really just depends on how they start, because Perilia is like okay. They don't really summon from the hand too often. They could probably play around it very well, because they can go like inclusion searches one of the level 5s, and then pop the field spell, or sorry, the inclusion, and then they Fool's Barrier for 2. So honestly, I feel like we won't worry about this card too much, and then put in these 9, maybe these 11 if you like, depending on how you feel. So again, we can get rid of these, hit that. Nib is, they could play around Nib, which is really funny. I guess you can nib them in a certain scenario. There's a funny, really weird nib spot you can do. If that, I forget its name, but it's the level 2. It's like Tricolos or whatever that name is. The one that summons from the main deck and then immediately synchro. There's a really funny line if they somehow extend into Nib somehow, and they synchro into 7, and then they use the Tricolos or whatever it's called, banish it from the graveyard, targeting the synchro 7. You can actually nib there, and they don't pop a synchro monster. They don't summon 2 from the main deck. So that's something to keep in mind. But I think if they're bad, Nib works that way versus them. So I will probably say they most likely could play around Nib, even though they get hit with these, because it is what it is. So I'll probably put Nib to 2 in this matchup, because you are playing the Lancias, and Lancias can hurt them a lot, like a lot. I'm trying to see what Valor Imperm really do to the matchup. Again, this is another matchup that I need more experience in, but it's not very popular on the ladder, and I need to play against it more. But the times I go against it, I have no issues kind of beating it. Their inboard is insane if you don't hand trap them, but I've been out playing them. Like, you have to be like an Omni Negate from the Cyber End like negate guy. I can't think of his name right now. So you had to go through that. A lot of times they can end on the Synchro 7 that negates spells and traps. And then you had to deal with the cluster. And then they actually have pretty insane follow-up as well. So it's just like there's a lot of things you got to deal with. And they kind of remind me of like Unchained / Orcus. Like, they banish from the graveyard like Orcus. And then they have like the, of course, I'm getting bodied. And they have like the grind game or the inconsistency of an Unchained deck. Sometimes they just break, you know what I'm saying? So I'm waiting for this to reconnect. Thank you, Dueling Book. Thank you, Dueling Book. But yeah. So it just depends how they play. And I'm sure their meta is not being developed as quickly as like, I don't know, like Ryzeal and Maliss, because those are the two most popular decks and most likely will win the YCS. So I'm not exactly sure what direction they're going in. If I were to play the deck, I feel like you could include like a Cash tier package. You can include like the Taka Tom board, that package. You can include Adventure if you like. Adventure may be the worst one because it takes up a lot of main deck space, but I mean, you could play it like that. I mean, you could play it with Tidal, but depending on how they play, and you have to keep an eye on how they play their deck, then I'll assign that towards that, because some players are not as good. And say, for example, like Maliss shouldn't really lose to Nib, right? If you have Nib in your hand, they should outplay that Nib every single time. But I have one against Maliss players that are not as strong, and Nib cooks. So I would say keep an eye on how they play, how they sequence their lines, and then go into that as well. But for sure, you want to put in these 9 cards. You can put in these if you like. I probably wouldn't recommend it because they have a lot of negates. So probably not play these cards. Especially because they do end on a spell and trap negate. So this is a spell and trap that you don't want to include. So you don't want to put more weaknesses into that inboard. You got some very strong monster effects that can beat over the spell and trap negate. So that's really cool. Yeah, you take these out, and yeah, I guess something like this or something like that. So yeah, that's great. Again, if you don't feel comfortable, you can also just take out another engraver, put these in for the Sylvies. Again, I keep saying this because I feel like somebody's going to say, well, you're not going to have an engine going second. I mean, it seems like that, but trust me, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! It will happen, but like, it happens way less than you think. Like, I literally bricked one game, and it was on stream at my locals, and I opened literally 6 hand traps. And it wasn't even in the Charmy cards. It was literally double Ash, Veiler, Nib, Imperm, or something like that. And I top decked like a Bestial. And I was like, well, there's nothing you can do about that, right? So, whatever. And then when I started to play, like, I opened Black Witch. They have the Imperm for it. So, they kind of ran away with that one. Even though I think that was technically winnable. But I think I misplayed in some scenarios. No, he had the Ash for the Requiem. So, yeah, I couldn't play. So, it is what it is. Your deck is tough going second anyway, so you want to play all these cards to give yourself the best chance of going second. So that's how I'll probably side deck versus Crytron. So let's keep moving. Next, let's do Tenpai Fiendsmith. So Tenpai Fiendsmith. I think this is another weird deck that, like, going first is not too bad. I feel like their inboard is not crazy, but the fact that they play so much non-engine is very, very scary. So they probably most likely will live. Seals is crazy if they want to go in for that. Printy and Princess bringing back the already used Tenpai cards to kill you. It's very tough. If they open up the fill spell, that's also a very tough thing. So this deck is probably like the weirdest and probably the most scariest deck to prepare for, because it can just kill you out of nowhere. And then they also have like the beautiful grind game of the Fiendsmith cards. So, since we have Fiendsmith in here, I mean, this is an auto inclusion. You can also put in these if you like. And see, that's the problem too, because it depends if they're playing like the Bestial stuff. So they're trying to set up a regain on you, then you can put these in here, because you're probably gonna draw off their normal summon, and then they go into the the Bestial lines and stuff like that to set up a regain. You get another draw off that. So I guess technically you could put these in here. you could put in these cards if you're feeling that they play like a lot of hand traps and stuff like that. You can probably counter with some board breaking. The end on seals like talents to probably like draw 2 or take or something like that can help them, you know, can break the boards and stuff like that. But I say I would stick to these 9 because I don't like these going for or going second as much as I like them going first. So that's a thing. So let's just put in these 9 for now. Of course, the Bishills are very strong to counteract their Bishills and also their Fiendsmith engine. I think the Nibiru is still very good versus Fiendsmith. Ash is very strong versus the Fiendsmith, and then also very good versus the Bishill stuff. You want to keep them off of Magma Moot. Veilers are very strong to stop the Hydras, the normal summon or the Labellion to get them off of the regain. Same thing with these. This is also very strong too because of the, yeah, I think I already said that. So again, same as always, these cards right here. And then let's just cut, we can cut a Veiler for here. We don't have to have Veiler. And what's another card we could probably cut here? Same thing here. We could just probably cut one of these because again, I like this mostly for Maliss. That's why I have this as a 3 of. I feel like if Maliss didn't exist, this will always be a 2 of in my side deck. So you can do something like that. Just deciding these 8 cards, putting these 8 cards in, and that is that. So you don't always have to put in 3 ofs just because it's a 3 of. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe this is probably like just overkill or whatever because you can draw off the Labellion, you can draw off the Fiendsmith stuff, but this is only strong when they start with the Fiendsmith, like discard hand effect. So that's for that. And last but not least, and probably not as popular, but you may run into it, is Heroes. Now Heroes is very, very, very tricky to play against because they got a ton of gas. They got the Branded Fusion, which is the Fusion Destiny, which is like a 1-card combo. And then they got the new Evil Hero Trap, which is basically a 1-card combo that summon the Prison End or whatever that Evil Hero card is. Their end board is actually insane. They could actually end on like DPE plus like the one guy that acts like a skill drain. They could also end on what's that guy called? The hero guy that's like a Macrocosmos and stuff like that. Like they got some scary stuff. Nib is good, but like if the hero player plays very well, I actually seen them outplay Nib, which is really, really crazy. And if you hold Nib way too long, they can get too much advantage and they can still kind of like, it depends on the hero player. Like a lot of hero players are probably not them, just gonna be real. But Nib still cooks. Like you still want to keep the Nibs in here. Veiler Imperms are very weird versus this deck because the card that you want to Imperm or Veiler is the Vision Hero Vylon. He is the best card. You want them to keep him off of Poly. If you feel really like scared on what to Ash, because sometimes they can hit you, like this is a deck that literally destroys Ash. Like there's so many good Ash targets in this deck, but if you have another power spell that beats your Ash, they're gonna still pretty much full combo you anyway. So unless you have a really good read or a ton of hand traps into this matchup, or it depends on how your hand is structured, you do want to Ash the Violon as well to one that searches Poly, because you would keep them off the Poly. It cuts off a lot of their hero plays, right? Because it's a fusion deck. So if you can keep them off of Poly, you can do that. That's kind of like the safest card to hit a lot of the times. But if you feel like you could put your Ash somewhere else and then you have Imperma Veiler to stop the Violon, then that's great as well. So you have to be very careful how they sequence their plays. You play based off how they open, because there's a ton of hero lines and stuff like that. I think the Bishills are very strong to banish the malicious and stuff like that, and just put bodies on board. And this also how helps you beat over the hero that is a Macrocosmos, so you can just go into battle phase, beat over. But see, the problem with that is a lot of times they're gonna have DPE, but if you keep them off of like the fusion cards, you can literally keep them off of DPE and then beat over the Macrocosmos for game and stuff like that. So that's really great. But yes, going back to it, I think Lancia is super good versus the hero deck because they can't Violon effect to banish the search. And then they can't malicious and stuff like that too. And there's other cards they can technically banish. I think that's like an evil hero that search for super poly, so they can't banish for that. And there's some other things that they can't really banish and stuff like that. Like they can't miracle fusion. So I think this card is actually underrated. You can actually play these if you want to, because I mean their inboard is technically beatable, but like they also end on that like that one trap card that's like an Omni, which is really strong. So yeah, so that's gonna be very, you know, situational in that. But yeah, I would say Ferraros cooks. Perulia is pretty okay. I think Perulia you can get away with playing. Probably not though. I'm not exactly sure. I think let's just stick with the board breakers. I think this definitely cooks. This cooks, and then I think putting in those cooks. So I would definitely recommend just putting in those, unless I'm missing something. And then the cards that we'll cut from here is the same as always. Cut this 5, 7. And then let's do away with an imperm or a Veiler, and then that's how side deck versus heroes. All right, guys. Again, I'm sorry this is another long video, but I hope this come across very useful and things of that nature. Hopefully, this give you guys some ideas of how I side deck and how to side deck in general, because side decking is probably one of the hardest parts of Yu-Gi-Oh. So yeah, hopefully you guys find that very informational. Again, leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel for more awesome content. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.